He'll regret losing me, Eliza whispered, her voice trembling with a fury she hadn't yet learned to wear like armor. She didn't know anyone was listening. She didn't know that across the room, behind darkened glass and cigarette smoke, a man with cold eyes and colder power had just decided she was the most interesting thing he'd seen in years. And she definitely didn't know that by morning, her ex-boyfriend's regret would be the least dangerous thing in her life. If this story already has your heart racing, hit subscribe, drop your city in the comments, and let's see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. She said it like a prayer. Like if she whispered it hard enough into the noise of the club, the universe would lean down and promise her it was true. He'll regret losing me. Eliza Grant stood at the edge of the bar, one hand wrapped around a glass she hadn't touched. The other pressed flat against her stomach, like she was trying to hold herself together from the outside in. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were dry. She had cried for 4 days straight. 4 days of mascara on pillowcases and voicemails she deleted before she could send them, and she had made herself a deal tonight. No tears. Not here. Not for him. Eliza! Jen's voice cut through the baseline. You're doing the thing again. What thing? The thing where you look like you're calculating how to destroy someone. Eliza turned. Her best friend was grinning at her over the rim of a champagne flute, wearing a dress that could stop traffic, and an expression that said, "I told you so," was already loaded and ready to fire. I'm fine, Eliza said. You've said, I'm fine 47 times since Tuesday. Jen set her glass down. Babe, Michael cheated on you with a woman he met at a conference in Phoenix. He is not worth the energy it takes to be this composed. Eliza's fingers tightened around her glass. I know that. Then drink something. Dance with someone. Do anything other than stand here looking like a marble statue of female rage. I like marble statues. Eliza. Fine. She finally lifted the glass, took a sip. It burned the way she needed it to. I'm here, aren't I? I came. I put on the dress. Jen looked her over, the deep burgundy wrap dress, the heels that added 3 inches, the hair she'd actually blown out for the first time in a week. You look incredible for what it's worth. I know I do. Eliza's chin lifted. He should have thought about that. Jen laughed, a real one, startled out of her. There she is. And for just a moment, Eliza almost believed her own performance. She almost felt the version of herself she was pretending to be unbothered, unbreakable, already over it. Then the music shifted, and she saw him. Michael. He was across the room near the far booth, his hand resting easily on the lower back of a woman Eliza had never seen before. Tall blonde, laughing at something he'd said with her whole body tilted toward him like a sunflower toward light. Eliza's stomach dropped 6 floors. Oh no, Jen breathed. Did you know he'd be here? Eliza's voice came out very quiet, very controlled, the kind of quiet that precedes something loud. I swear to God, I did not know. It's fine. The words were automatic, hollow. It doesn't matter. But her hands were shaking. She set the glass down before she could drop it. Eliza, we can leave. I'm not leaving. She said it like a door slamming shut. I am not leaving this club because Michael decided to show up with whoever that is. I was here first. I put on this dress first. She exhaled through her nose. I am staying. Jen searched her face. Then slowly she nodded. Okay. Then we stay. And we do not look in that direction for the rest of the night. Agreed. They lasted 4 minutes before Eliza looked again. He was laughing now. The real laugh, the one she used to think was only for her, that crinkle at the corner of his eye that she'd spent 2 years believing meant, you are my person. He was giving it to a stranger in a green dress, and it landed on Eliza like a slap with an open palm. She turned back to the bar, ordered something stronger, and under the noise of the music, under the crowd, and the lights, and the performance of a woman who was perfectly fine, she said it again. Quieter this time. Fiercer. He'll regret losing me. She meant it like a vow. She didn't know it was also an introduction. The VIP section of Onyx was separated from the general floor by a half wall of frosted glass, and the kind of unspoken velvet rope energy that made people unconsciously slow their steps when they walked past it. Eliza had never been in it, had never particularly wanted to be. That kind of power display had always felt like a performance she had no interest in watching. But someone in it had been watching her. She didn't notice the first time his gaze found her, or the second. She was too busy executing the careful art of not looking at Michael, which required a level of focused non-attention that left room for very little else. The third time, the man in the VIP section leaned forward slightly in his chair. Just slightly. The way a chess player leans forward when the board suddenly gets interesting. His name was Dante Russo, though no one in the room said it above a murmur, if they said it at all. He was 34 years old, built with the kind of contained physical authority that didn't need to announce itself, dressed in a dark jacket over a black shirt, with the collar open, exactly one button, not two. His hair was dark, his jaw was precise, and his eyes, even at this distance, had the quality of something that had learned long ago that most things in a room were not worth the energy of real attention. Eliza Grant had just earned his real attention. He had caught the exact moment she saw the man across the room, had watched the way her spine went rigid and her chin went up, not in anger at first, but in something more complicated than anger. Pride battling devastation in real time. She'd won the battle. He'd watched her win it. And then he'd watched her turn back to the bar, and he'd seen her lips move with something he was too far away to hear. But he'd read the shape of it. She wasn't crying, she wasn't running, she wasn't making a scene. She was standing there in a burgundy dress with a shaking hand she refused to show, and she was deciding something. Dante Russo found that extraordinarily compelling. He looked to his left where his associate Paolo stood against the wall, with the posture of a man who was always watching everything and always appeared to be watching nothing. "The woman at the bar," Dante said. "Burgundy dress, dark hair." Paolo's gaze moved, returned. "I see her. Find out who she is." Paolo raised an eyebrow, just slightly. This was unusual. Dante did not typically express interest in strangers at clubs. He came to Onyx because he owned a silent stake in it, and because the VIP section had a private exit, not because he was hoping to meet someone. Paolo had known him for 9 years. This was new. "And then?" Paolo asked. Dante leaned back. His eyes returned to Eliza, who had just straightened her shoulders like someone consciously choosing posture over collapse. "And then bring her an invitation." Eliza was on her second drink vodka soda this time, because she was apparently now a woman who made pragmatic liquor choices based on survival when the man appeared at her elbow. He was compact, dark-suited with a face that was professionally polite in a way that was slightly too precise to be natural. "Excuse me," he said. "Miss—" "I'm not interested," she said without looking up. "My employer would like to offer you a seat in the VIP section." She looked up now. "I'm sorry." The man, Paolo, though she didn't know his name yet, held out a small card. Thick stock. No print on it except a number in the corner handwritten in black ink. "As a compliment." "No obligation." Eliza stared at the card. Then she looked past him toward the frosted glass partition, and for the first time she registered the VIP section, not as abstract backdrop, but as actual space, the low lighting, the leather seating, the several people who moved with the careful ease of those accustomed to being the most powerful people in any given room. And then she registered the man watching her. He didn't look away when she caught him. That was the first thing that struck her, the absolute stillness of his regard. The way he simply held her gaze like a man who had never once in his life been embarrassed to be caught looking at something he wanted to understand. It should have felt predatory. It didn't quite. It felt like being seen by something that had very high standards about what it considered worth seeing. "Who is he?" she asked. Paolo's professional smile didn't change. "Someone who found you interesting." "That's not an answer." "No." Paolo agreed pleasantly. "It isn't." Eliza looked at Jen, who had witnessed the entire exchange and was now doing the thing where she communicated an entire opinion with only her eyebrows. The eyebrows were currently saying, "This is either the worst idea you've ever had or the best one, and I genuinely cannot tell which, but you should absolutely find out." Eliza looked back at the card. Then she looked at Michael across the room, still laughing, still completely unaware she existed in the same building. She thought about the dress she'd put on, the 4 days of crying, the way she'd meant it when she'd whispered those words. She took the card. "Tell him," she said. "I'll need 5 minutes." She spent those 5 minutes in the bathroom telling herself a series of very reasonable things. She did not know who this man was. She was emotionally compromised. Going to sit with a stranger in a VIP section because you wanted your ex-boyfriend to see you was not a healthy coping mechanism. She was a 29-year-old structural engineer with a graduate degree and a 5-year plan, and she did not make decisions based on spite and eye contact. She looked at herself in the mirror. She was still wearing the burgundy dress. Her eyes were dry. Her hands in the last 5 minutes had stopped shaking. "Don't be an idiot," she told her reflection. Her reflection looked back at her with an expression that said, "But what if just for one night you stopped being so sensible?" She straightened the dress, fixed the one strand of hair that had worked loose, and walked back out. Paolo was waiting. He led her toward the frosted glass partition, said something to the man who controlled access, and the slight physical resistance of that invisible boundary, the one ordinary people unconsciously honored, simply parted for her. She walked through it. "Tom," he stood when she approached. She hadn't expected that. She didn't know why she hadn't expected it. It was basic courtesy, but somehow the gesture landed differently from this man. He rose with a deliberateness that made it feel less like habit and more like decision, like every movement he made was preceded by a quiet, internal choice. "Eliza," he said. She stopped. "You already know my name." "I do." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Dante Russo, please sit." She sat, mostly because her legs had decided to make the choice before her brain fully ratified it. "How do you know my name?" "Paolo is efficient." He settled back into his chair with the ease of a man in his own living room. "Can I ask what you were saying at the bar just now? Your lips were moving." Eliza blinked. "You were watching me that closely." Yes, the directness of it was startling. No apology, no deflection, no performance of casualness. Just yes. "I was watching you." As if it were the most natural thing in the world to admit. "I was talking to myself," she said carefully, "about someone who doesn't deserve the airtime." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, more like the shadow of one, the implication of amusement without its full deployment. "The man across the room," Dante said. "With the woman in green." Eliza's stomach clenched. "You noticed that." "I notice most things." She looked at him steadily. Tried to read the landscape of him the way she read architectural drawings, for structure, for what was load-bearing, for where the things that couldn't move were hiding. "He cheated," she said. She didn't know why she said it. It came out before she decided to offer it. 4 days ago. I found out on a Tuesday. The conference in Phoenix was apparently more productive than he let on. Dante didn't say "I'm sorry." He didn't make the sympathetic sound people made when they wanted to seem kind, without doing the work of actually responding to what you'd said. He just looked at her for a moment, with that same steady assessing attention. "And you came here tonight," he said, "to remind yourself that losing you was his mistake." The air went slightly sideways in her chest. "Something like that," she said quietly. He leaned forward, then just slightly, the same chess player lean she hadn't been able to see from across the room. Up close, it was more legible. He was interested in her the way someone becomes interested in a puzzle that has just revealed an unexpected layer of complexity. "Was it working?" he asked. "Before you saw him here?" "It was starting to. And now," she lifted her chin, "now I'm sitting in a VIP section with a man who knows my name and watched me talk to myself." I'd say the evening has taken an unexpected turn. This time the smile was real, brief, controlled, but real. It arrived and departed like something that had not been given permission to stay long. Dante Russo, she said, trying the name out loud. Should I know that name? The question landed in the air between them with a weight she didn't entirely understand yet. Across the room she saw Michael turn. Saw the moment his eyes found her. Really found her. Registered her log the VIP section, and the man across from her and the glass of excellent whiskey that had appeared at her elbow without her ordering it. She saw Michael's jaw tighten. Saw the woman in green say something, and Michael not hear it. Eliza looked away from Michael, back to Dante. Should I? She asked again. Dante's eyes were very dark and very calm and completely unreadable, except for the small detail that he was still looking at her with that quality of having decided she was worth understanding. That, he said quietly, depends entirely on how the rest of the night goes. The rest of the night went like this. They talked, not the kind of talking that was really performing, not the cocktail party version, where each sentence was a small advertisement for a curated self. They talked the way people do, when something in the atmosphere makes performance feel exhausting, when the noise around you is loud enough to create a strange bubble of privacy in the middle of a crowd. He asked her what she did. She told him structural engineering restorations, specifically old buildings, she helped hold together when time and neglect had done their worst. You fix what's already broken, he said. I prefer I find out what's still worth saving. He was quiet for a moment with that. Then, and how do you decide? You go deeper than what you can see from the outside. You look at what's actually load-bearing, what the whole structure depends on, and you figure out if it's still there. He looked at her with something that had more weight than interest now, something that was closer to recognition. What do you do? She asked, because she still didn't know, hadn't placed the name, hadn't yet begun to understand the geometry of the space he occupied in this city, and what that meant for anyone who stepped into it. Acquisitions, he said. Properties, businesses, things with potential that need the right management. That's a very general answer. It is. He agreed without any indication he planned to improve on it. She should have pushed. She would think about this later, the moment she could have pressed harder, and chose instead to let it go, lulled by the quality of his attention and the strange ease of the conversation and the excellent whiskey she still didn't know who had authorized. She let it go. They talked for 2 hours. At one point, Jen appeared at the edge of the VIP partition, caught Eliza's eye, performed a rapid series of expressions. Are you okay? Who is that? He is objectively gorgeous. Text me if you need me. Also text me regardless. And then retreated back to the dance floor. At another point, Paolo materialized briefly at Dante's shoulder, murmured something below the music, and Dante's expression went very still for exactly 3 seconds before it returned to the same composed attention. She didn't ask. He didn't offer. And at another point, the moment she would keep returning to afterward, turning it over like a coin she couldn't quite identify. Michael walked past the VIP section, close enough to see her clearly, close enough for their eyes to meet. She did not look away first. Dante, who was mid-sentence, paused, followed the direction of her gaze, processed the tableau without any visible reaction whatsoever. And then, with a deliberateness that she would later understand was characteristic of him, he reached across the low table and lifted her glass, turned it slightly, and set it back down closer to her. It was nothing. It was the smallest gesture in the world. But Michael was still looking, and Dante's arm had passed between them like a line drawn in the air, and Michael's jaw had done the thing again, and then Michael had kept walking. Eliza exhaled. You didn't have to do that, she said. Do what? Dante said. And he looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes, and she could not tell, absolutely could not tell whether he was playing innocent or genuinely had no idea what she meant. Both options were somehow equally unsettling. It was nearly 2 in the morning when she finally stood to leave. Jen was already by the exit sending, We are leaving energy across the room with the focused intensity of a woman who had made her peace with one more hour, but was now completely done. Thank you, Eliza said. She said it simply without overthinking it. For this, it was unexpected. Dante stood again, that same deliberate rising. It was, he said, unexpectedly good. She picked up her bag. Hesitated at something in the way he was looking at her. That attention again, the quality of it, like she was still something unresolved that he was not entirely willing to walk away from. Dante Russo, she said one more time, still testing it. I'll look you up when I get home. Something moved through his expression, too quick to catch fully. You'll find some things, he said. Don't decide until we talk again. She tilted her head. Are we going to talk again? Yes, he said. No qualifier. No, I'd like to, or if you want to. Just yes. She walked away, through the frosted glass, back into the noise of the ordinary floor. She found Jen, and they wound their way through the crowd and out into the cool night air, and Eliza didn't look back, even though every single nerve in her body was suggesting she should. Outside, Jen grabbed her arm. What? Jen said. Was that? I have no idea, Eliza said honestly. Who is he? He said acquisitions, properties, businesses. Jen stared at her. That tells me nothing. I know. Eliza looked up at the sky where the city light drowned out everything but the brightest stars. Her chest was doing something she didn't have a clean category for, not the hollow ache of seeing Michael. Something else. Something that had more gravity to it. Did he ask for your number? No. Did you give it to him? No. Then how is he planning on? Eliza's phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. 4 words. Get home safely, Eliza. She stopped walking, stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered over it without deciding anything. What? Jen demanded. What is it? Eliza looked back at the entrance to Onyx. Paulo was standing just outside the door, hands in his pockets, watching the street with the expression of someone whose job it was to watch streets. He wasn't looking at her directly. But when her gaze found him, the slight incline of his head was too precise to be accidental. She looked back at her phone. Get home safely, Eliza. She thought about the way Dante had looked at her when she'd asked if she should know his name. The 3 seconds of stillness when Paulo whispered in his ear. The way the question had been answered, not with a yes or a no, but with something that felt like a door half open with unknown rooms behind it. Don't decide until we talk again. Jen, she said slowly, still looking at the text. Yeah. I think I may have just done something either very stupid or very significant. Jen looked at the phone, back at Eliza's face, back at the phone. In my experience, Jen said carefully, with you, those are usually the same thing. Eliza locked her screen, put her phone in her bag, and as the two of them started walking as the city noise swallowed the thud of the club behind them, she thought about the way Dante Russo had said yes. Just that. Just yes. No softening, no hedge, and felt somewhere deep and cautionary and undeniable that the ground beneath her carefully constructed life had just shifted by exactly 1 degree. Small, nearly imperceptible. The beginning of everything. She told herself she wouldn't search his name that night. She searched it at 2:47 in the morning, sitting on the edge of her bed still in the burgundy dress, one heel off and one heel on her phone screen, the only light in the room. Dante Russo. The results came back in under a second. Hundreds of them. And the first thing she felt was not fear, not excitement. It was the very specific discomfort of realizing that you have walked into a room much larger than the door suggested. Real estate. Development. A charitable foundation with his family name on it. A profile in a business magazine from 3 years ago. She clicked it, skimmed it. Words like empire and legacy and third generation, and the Russo family's reach across the city's commercial landscape. A photograph of him at some formal event in a dark suit, looking at the camera, with the exact same quality of attention he'd turned on her across the VIP section. Like the camera was a thing he was deciding whether to trust. There were other things too. Things that weren't articles exactly, more like the shape of an absence. Forums where his name appeared, and then the thread went quiet. A comment section under a city news piece about a waterfront development deal, where someone had written, "You know whose money that is," and received no replies. The negative space around him was as informative as everything else. She put her phone face down on the bed. "Don't decide until we talk again," she said to her ceiling. She took off the other heel. She hung up the burgundy dress with more care than usual, which she recognized as a symptom of something she wasn't ready to diagnose. And she lay in the dark for a long time, not sleeping, turning the shape of the evening over and over, the way he'd said her name before she'd given it. The 3 seconds of stillness when Paolo whispered. The text that had arrived before she'd had time to wonder whether he would reach out. "Get home safely, Eliza." Not a question. Not "did you get home safely?" A statement. A directive. As if the outcome had already been managed, and this was simply the confirmation. She fell asleep just before 4. She dreamed about buildings, her usual territory, but in the dream, when she got deep enough into the structure to find what was load-bearing, it wasn't steel or stone. It was something she couldn't name. Something that held everything up and gave nothing away. She woke up and thought about Dante Russo before she thought about Michael, and that told her something she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. It was the first morning in 4 days that she hadn't. That told her something too. The second thing that told her something was Paolo. She didn't see him at first. She was running late. She had a site visit at 9, an older building in the warehouse district that a developer wanted assessed for structural viability, and she was moving the way she moved when she was late, which was fast and internally chaotic, but externally composed, because Eliza Grant did not visibly hurry. She had her bag, her coffee, her roll of drawings, and her phone, and she was going through the building's lobby with the focused forward momentum of a woman who had places to be. She clocked Paolo at the corner. He was on the far side of the street, standing with a coffee of his own, reading something on his phone. He was doing it very convincingly. The kind of very convincingly that only happened when someone was professionally trained to be convincing. Eliza stopped walking. She stood in the middle of the sidewalk and stared at him. Her morning coffee was suddenly very hot in her hand, like her body had noticed something her brain was still processing. Paolo looked up, met her eyes, nodded once, that same precise inclination as last night, and returned to his phone. She kept walking. But her heart was doing something irregular now. Something between alarmed and she was honest enough with herself to admit it, something adjacent to steadied. Like the fact of being watched was terrible, and also in some way she didn't entirely hate nothing. She got 2 blocks before she pulled out her phone and typed to the unknown number. "Your associate is following me." The reply came in 40 seconds. "He's making sure you got to work safely. He'll stay outside." She stared at that. Read it again. The specificity of it to work, which meant he knew where she worked, or had found out this morning, which meant Paolo's assignment had started earlier than she'd realized. "I didn't ask for protection," she typed. "I know." A pause. 3 dots appearing and disappearing. Then, "Consider it a courtesy." She put her phone in her bag with more force than necessary. She walked the rest of the way to the site, thinking about the word courtesy. How it could mean generosity, or how it could mean "I have already decided something without consulting you." And how with Dante Russo she genuinely could not tell which one it was. The site visit took 3 hours. She measured, photographed, made notes, had a detailed argument with the developer's contractor about what counted as a load-bearing wall, and won it. This was normal. This was her ground, the place where she was fluent and confident and did not feel like someone who had sat in a VIP section the night before watching a man she didn't know say her name, like he'd already decided to learn everything else. She came out of the building at noon to find Paolo still across the street. He had switched from coffee to water. She could see a takeout bag from the deli 2 doors down, sitting at his feet. He had apparently arranged himself for a full day. She walked directly across the street. He looked up when she was 10 feet away. His expression did not change. It had the quality of a man who had been approached by difficult situations before and considered this one relatively manageable. "Hi," she said. "Miss Grant," he said. "You've been out here for 3 hours." "Yes." "In the cold." "It's not particularly cold today." She crossed her arms. "Is Dante Russo going to tell me what's actually happening here? Or am I supposed to just absorb a stranger standing outside my worksite as a normal Tuesday?" Paolo considered this. "I think," he said carefully, "that Mr. Russo would like to have that conversation with you himself." "Then tell him to call me. He prefers in person." "Of course he does," she exhaled. "Tell him I'm free at 7. Paolo nodded, already reaching for his phone. She walked away before she could second-guess any of it. She called Jen from the street. "He had someone following me," she said before Jen could say hello. A silence. Then, define following. "Outside my building this morning, outside my worksite, his associate from last night, Paolo." Another silence. Longer. "Eliza. That's okay. That's a lot." "I know. Are you scared?" She thought about it honestly, which she owed herself. She stood on the sidewalk and asked the question the right way without any performance in it, without the version she would tell, and the version that was true getting confused. "I should be," she said finally. "I know I should be." "That's not the same as yes." "No," she admitted. "It isn't." Jen's voice went careful. "What did you find when you looked him up? Enough to know he's significant, not enough to know exactly what kind." "Eliza, when you say significant, I mean the kind of significant that has a foundation with his name on it, and also has negative space around him in comment sections." She paused. "The kind of significant that texts you before you've wondered if he will." Jen was quiet for a beat. "Are you going to see him again?" 7 o'clock, she said. The sound Jen made was somewhere between a groan and acceptance. "Text me his address. Text me every hour. And Eliza, if anything feels wrong. I'll leave. Promise me." "I promise you." She meant it. She also knew that the thing she needed to figure out, the thing that was living somewhere below her sternum and had been since last night, was whether wrong was the right word for what she was walking into, or whether it was something else entirely. Something that had no good word yet, because she'd never been in its territory before. "I love you," Jen said. "Please don't fall for a mob boss." Eliza almost said, "That's not what this is." Instead, she said, "I'll text you the address," and hung up. She stood there for another second. Then she turned back to look at Paolo across the street. He was already looking at his phone. Already, she thought, relaying her answer. She went back to work. She spent the afternoon doing what she always did when she was anxious about something real. She worked on something structural. She pulled up the assessment files for the warehouse district building, ran the calculations twice, wrote her preliminary report with the kind of precision that required all of her, every part of her that could generate noise had to be quiet for this work to happen. It was the thing she loved most about engineering. It demanded all of you, or it didn't work at all. By 6 o'clock, she had a solid draft of the report and a marginally calmer nervous system. By 6:15, she was standing in front of her closet doing something she refused to call getting dressed for him because she would have changed out of her work clothes regardless. The fact that she took an additional 8 minutes was entirely coincidental. The fact that she chose the gray dress, not the burgundy, not anything that would suggest she was trying, was practical. The gray was professional, understated. The gray said, "I am a person who takes meetings seriously and does not make assumptions about what this is." The gray looked, as it happened, very good on her. She told herself this was irrelevant. She was ready at 6:50. Paolo texted her the address at 6:52, which meant either he'd been waiting for her to be ready, or the timing was coincidence. And she was becoming less certain by the hour that Dante Russo operated in the territory of coincidence. It was a townhouse in a neighborhood that was quieter than she expected. Tree-lined street, Brownstone facades, the kind of block that communicated old money not by being loud about it, but by being so understated, it circled back around to its own kind of loudness. The building itself was handsome and severe and gave nothing away from the outside. She stood at the door for a moment. She thought about what she'd told the developer's contractor that morning. You go deeper than what you can see from the outside. You find what's load-bearing. She rang the bell. Dante opened the door himself. She had not expected that either. She wasn't sure what she'd expected Paolo or someone else, some functionary of that careful world he moved in. But it was Dante in dark trousers and a charcoal sweater with the sleeves pushed up to the forearm and a glass of something already in his hand, and he looked at her for one full second with something unguarded in his face, before the composure settled back into place. It was 1 second. She caught it. "You came," he said. "You expected me not to—" "I expected you to consider not coming," he said, stepping back to let her in. "I thought the Paolo situation might tip the scales." It almost did. She walked past him into the house. It was warm inside and quiet in a way that felt intentional, not empty, but settled. Like a place that was genuinely lived in by someone who valued stillness. "Are you going to explain that?" "I'm going to try." He led her through to a room with a long table set for two, a low arrangement of food already out. Not a formal dinner, she noticed, but the kind of deliberate, considered spread that someone assembled because they'd thought about what the other person might want without having asked. Bread and oil. Small plates of things. A bottle of wine open and breathing. She sat. He sat. She looked at the table and then at him. "Explain," she said. He didn't hedge. She would keep noticing this about him, the directness, the absence of the social lubricant that most people applied reflexively between themselves and any difficult truth. "You sat with me last night," he said, "in my section. You had the attention of people in that room who notice when someone has my attention. That creates a situation where your safety is something I take seriously." She absorbed this, felt the specific weight of it. "For one evening. It doesn't work in time increments," he said. "Once someone has been seen with me, the clock doesn't reset when they leave the room." She put her wine glass down. "Dante, I need you to say what you're actually saying." He looked at her. "I'm saying that my name comes with a context that I didn't warn you about last night because you didn't know to ask, and I didn't choose to lead with it. And I'm saying that given that I feel responsible for what that context means for you." "What does it mean?" A pause. He turned his wine glass once. Slow. "It means that the people who pay attention to my movements paid attention to you last night. It means Paolo outside your building today was not surveillance, it was a precaution. A difference I understand you have no reason to trust yet." Yet. She noticed the word. "Are you in danger?" she asked. "Routinely?" "I operate in spaces where power is currency," he said carefully. "There are always people who would prefer to have leverage over the people I care about than to come at me directly." The words fell between them, and she sat with the specific sentence, "the people I care about," and the fact that he had used it in this context in relation to her after one evening, and a text and 2 hours of conversation. And she knew the correct response was to note the presumption of it, the speed of it, the way it assumed a great deal. She knew the correct response. She looked at him and said, "How dangerous are we talking?" Something in him changed. Very slightly. Like a tension that had been waiting to see which way she'd go had just released. "Not to you," he said. "Not while I can prevent it." That's a conditional. Most honest things are. She ate something from the small plates. Thought. He let her think, which she noticed the lack of pressure, the willingness to let silence be silence instead of filling it with reassurance. "What do you do?" she asked. "Actually, not acquisitions and management. What does the context mean?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "My family has operated in this city for 3 generations. Real estate, yes. Construction, private lending. And yes, some areas that exist at the boundary of what is strictly legal and what is simply powerful." He held her gaze. "I am working actively to move those areas toward legitimate structure. That is not a performance for your benefit. It is what I have been doing for 4 years. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked, he said. And because I decided last night that I wasn't going to lie to you by omission. She stared at him. You decided last night? Yes. After 2 hours. After about 40 minutes, actually. A pause. Something almost wry. You said you find out what's still worth saving. I found that clarifying. Eliza sat back in her chair. Her pulse was doing something it had no professional justification for. She was acutely aware of being in a room with a man who had just told her with complete composure and without apology that he operated at the edge of the law and that he had decided 40 minutes into their acquaintance to be honest with her. It should have sent her to the door. She reached for her wine instead. I need you to understand something, she said. I am not a woman who makes decisions based on attraction. I've been in a relationship for 2 years with a man I trusted, and he lied to me in an airport hotel room in Phoenix, and the thing I am most angry about is not that he cheated, it's that I didn't see it coming. I missed it. I was reading the structure and I got it wrong. Dante was listening. Fully. The way he listened had a quality she was starting to recognize, not waiting for his turn to speak, but actually receiving. So if I am going to be in a room with you, she continued, and in your context, whatever that means, I need to know what I'm actually looking at. I won't tolerate being managed. I won't tolerate strategic honesty, which is the kind that tells you just enough truth to make the lies easier to hide. She looked at him directly. Can you do that, actually? The room was very quiet. Dante set his glass down. Ask me something, he said. Anything. Right now. She thought for 3 seconds. Paulo found out where I worked this morning, she said. Before 8 a.m. How me? Your LinkedIn, he said. He checked it when I asked him to find out who you were last night, before I sent the invitation. She nodded slowly. What were you going to do if I hadn't come tonight? Sent Paulo to give you a note asking if you'd reconsider. And if I'd said no to that? A beat. He looked at her steadily. Then I would have told Paulo to stand down, and I would have found another way to make sure you were safe without you having to see me again. It was, she thought, the most precise answer he could possibly have given. Not I would have respected your decision in the abstract feel-good sense, a specific concrete description of what he actually would have done. She thought about structures, about finding what was load-bearing. She thought about the text at 2 a.m, get home safely, Eliza, and how it hadn't felt like a threat, and how it hadn't felt like flattery. How it had felt like someone with a very long sightline, making sure that a thing they had decided to care about was accounted for. She picked up her fork. Tell me about the factory building, she said. He blinked. It was the first time she'd seen him do that, a genuine, unmanaged response. I'm sorry. You mentioned your family owns properties, buildings. I do restorations. She looked at him levelly. If we're going to be in each other's context, I'd like to be useful in mine. The pause that followed was just long enough for her to see very clearly that she had surprised him. And the expression that arrived on Dante Russo's face, then controlled as always but unable to entirely contain what was underneath, it was something she would think about for a very long time afterward. Because it was not victory. It was not satisfaction. It was something that looked quietly and unmistakably like relief. Like a man who had spent a long time in rooms where people performed versions of themselves for his benefit, and had just encountered someone who was simply, completely and without apology, real. There is a building, he said slowly. In the warehouse district. My family has owned it for 30 years. I've been trying to decide what to do with it. I was in the warehouse district today, she said. I know, he said quietly. She looked at him. He looked at her. The dinner between them was warm and the wine was good, and somewhere outside, Paulo was doing whatever Paulo did when his employer was occupied, and the city moved the way it always moved, unaware and indifferent and enormous. Show me the building, she said. And Dante Russo, for the second time in 2 days, looked at her like she was the most interesting thing he'd encountered in years, maybe longer. Thursday, he said. Thursday, she agreed. She did not leave until nearly 11. When she stepped out into the cool night air, she stood on the sidewalk for a moment and looked up at the sky, same sky as last night, same drowned-out stars, and took one long, slow breath. Her phone buzzed. Jen. Still alive. She smiled before she could stop herself. Typed back. Still alive. Going back Thursday. 3 seconds. Eliza. Marie Grant. She put her phone in her bag. Down the street, Paolo was already at the corner, hands in his pockets. He would walk a discreet half-block behind her to the subway, she would realize 2 minutes later. Not because she asked, not because she'd been told, simply because that was how it worked now. She walked into the dark, and the lights and the noise of the ordinary city, and she felt threading through the caution and the complexity, and the very reasonable voice in her head that kept trying to say slow down. She felt something else. Something that had nothing to do with Michael, or Phoenix, or Tuesday morning, or the 4 days of crying she'd done her level best to hide. She felt for the first time in longer than she wanted to admit genuinely alertly, dangerously awake. Thursday came faster than she was ready for. That was the honest version. The version she told herself on Wednesday night while she was pulling the warehouse district files and telling herself she was simply being professional, simply doing preliminary research the way she always did before a site visit, simply being thorough. The fact that she checked her phone 4 times in the process was unrelated. The fact that she'd slept better Tuesday and Wednesday than she had in the entire week before, that 2 nights of actual sleep, deep and dreamless, she filed under stress reduction general and moved on. Dante texted at 8 Thursday morning. Not good morning, not anything social, just an address and a time 10 o'clock, and then 30 seconds later, a second text. Bring your instincts, leave the drawings. She stared at that for a moment. Then typed back, I always bring both. His reply was immediate. Good. She smiled at her phone before she caught herself doing it. Set it face down on the kitchen counter. Made her coffee with the focused attention of a woman who was absolutely not thinking about a text message. She brought the drawings anyway. The building was on the edge of the warehouse district, a block north of where she'd been Tuesday, and she recognized it before she fully realized she did the proportions of it, the brickwork. Something in the way it sat on the block with a heaviness that wasn't just mass, but age. The kind of building that had absorbed decades and wasn't done yet. Dante was already there. Standing outside, no Paolo visible in a dark coat with his hands in his pockets, looking up at the facade with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not the assessed, contained attention he wore in rooms with other people. Something quieter. Something almost like grief, except sharper around the edges. He heard her before she reached him. You see it already? He said without turning. She stopped beside him, looked up. Let herself actually look the way she looked at buildings, not aesthetically, not sentimentally, but with the part of her brain that read structure like language. It's mid-century industrial, she said. Brick load-bearing on the perimeter, probably timber framing inside. I'd need to see the bones to know what kind of shape they're in. From the outside, she paused. From the outside, it's better than it has any right to be after however long it's been sitting. 30 years since it last operated, he said. My grandfather bought it in the 90s. He was going to do something with it. Then he didn't. Then my father was going to. Then he didn't. A pause. Then it became one of those things that nobody touches because touching it means deciding something, and deciding something means it's real. She looked at him. What was it? A factory. Custom furniture. My great-grandmother's family built it in 1951. He finally turned. His face had the quality of something carefully recomposed. My grandfather bought it back when the family that ran it had to sell. He thought keeping it was honoring something. I think he was right. I also think 30 years of keeping it has done the building no favors. She looked back at the facade, felt the familiar pull, the one that happened with buildings worth saving, a kind of professional instinct that lived below conscious thought. Can we go in? He produced a key. Inside was, and she had to redirect herself because she was not supposed to be describing what she saw. She was supposed to be tracking what she felt, what the structure communicated through its silences and its weight, and the particular quality of the air that moved in old buildings when you opened a door that hadn't been opened in a while. She felt the solidity of it. The timber framing she'd predicted was intact in ways she hadn't dared hope for. The floor flexed under her in one section and held firm in 6 others, and she crouched down and pressed her palm flat to the surface the way she did and felt what was there and what wasn't. Dante watched her work. He didn't hover. He didn't narrate. He stayed back and gave her the room to be in her own process, and she was aware of this. His awareness of space, the way he moved through it and allowed it. 20 minutes in, she stood up and turned to face him. "It's salvageable," she said. "More than salvageable. The bones are genuinely good, Dante. The foundation, the load-bearing walls, the primary framing. Whoever built this built it to last. What you've lost is cosmetic and surface systems. HVAC electrical, obviously. Some of the flooring in the north corner. But the thing that makes a building worth saving or not worth saving..." She stopped, pressed her hand once more to the nearest wall. "That's still here." He was looking at her, not the wall. "What would you do with it?" he asked. She hadn't been asked this question in this way before. Not what would it cost, or how long would it take, but what would you do with it, as if her vision was the relevant starting point, and the logistics would arrange themselves around it. "Mixed use," she said immediately. "Ground floor something with public access workshop space maybe, or studios. Something that nods to what this building was, what it made." She was moving now because she always moved when she was thinking structurally. Upper floors residential, but not the cold kind. The kind that remembers it's inside something with a history. She stopped in the center of the space. "I'd keep the exposed brick. I'd keep these ceiling heights. I'd find every original detail that's still here and build the new around it instead of over it." Silence. She realized she'd been talking for 2 minutes straight. Color moved to her face. "Sorry," she said. "You asked." "I did," he said. "Don't apologize for answering." "I got carried away." "You got honest." He walked toward her slowly, hands still in his pockets. "There's a difference." He stopped a few feet away. Close enough that she could read the thing in his face that was not quite professional anymore, had not been professional for a while, probably if she was being accurate about what she'd been noticing and choosing to partially file away. "I want to commission a full assessment," he said. "And if it supports what you're seeing right now, which I believe it will, I want to commission the restoration." He held her gaze. "With you leading it." She felt the professional part of her respond first, the clean spike of genuine excitement that a project like this produced. Real work, meaningful work, the kind she'd been steering toward for years. Then the other part caught up. The part that was standing in a building owned by a man who had Paolo following her home and had told her calmly about operating at the edge of legal, and had looked at her on Tuesday night with something that was not performing at all. "Dante." She kept her voice even. "You understand how this looks." "How does it look?" "Like you're giving me something. To, I don't know. Create an arrangement." He was quiet for a moment. Not defensive, considering. "Would you turn down this project if it came from anyone else?" "No." "Is the building what I described?" "Yes." "Is your assessment of it based on anything other than what you just spent 20 minutes determining?" She looked at him. "No." "Then I'm not giving you something," he said. "I'm asking you to do the thing you're qualified to do on a project that needs exactly what you have. The fact that He stopped, started again more carefully. "The fact that there is something else happening here is separate." "Is it?" she asked. "Can those two things actually be separate?" "I'd like to try," he said, "if you would." She stood in the middle of the building she'd just described with her hands and her instincts, and 2 minutes of unguarded honesty, and she felt the weight of the choice sitting on her sternum. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I'm asking." They walked back outside. The cold hit differently after the warmth of the building. She stood on the sidewalk and pulled her coat tighter and looked at her car and thought about Tuesday and the gray dress and the way he'd looked when she surprised him. Can I ask you something? She said. Yes. The foundation. The charitable one with your name on it. She turned to face him. Is that real or is it? It's real. No hesitation. Youth arts programs, 3 after-school centers. A mentorship pipeline we started 4 years ago that has put 62 kids into college. He looked at her with something steady and a little fierce. I understand why you're asking. Ask everything you need to ask. I would rather you ask than wonder. She nodded slowly. Okay. Okay. I'll do the assessment. She held up one finger. Professional terms. I bill at my rate. My firm handles the contract. If the assessment supports the project, we negotiate the restoration separately, same terms. Something loosened in his face. Agreed. Andante. She looked at him directly. If I find anything in this building that tells me it's not worth saving, I'll tell you. Even if it's not what you want to hear. I know, he said. That's why I asked you. She almost said something else. The thing that was living underneath the professional negotiation, the thing that had been there since the text at 2 a.m, and the gray dress, and the way he'd said yet. She almost said it. Instead, she said, I'll have a preliminary scope to you by Monday, and walked to her car and did not look back. Her phone rang 4 minutes into the drive. She expected Jen. It was Michael. She nearly let it go to voicemail. Her thumb hovered. Then something stubbornness or completion, or just the fact that she was a woman who did not leave things unfinished, made her answer. Hey, he said. He sounded careful, rehearsed. Michael. I saw you. A pause. Saturday, at Onyx. I wanted to say something, but I was busy, she said. Yeah. Another pause. Who was he? She felt a surge of something that was not anger exactly, but was in the same family. The audacity of the question. The specific texture of it. He had cheated on her in Phoenix, and he was calling to ask who she'd been sitting with. Someone I met, she said. He looked. Michael stopped. Started again. Eliza, I know I have no right to. You don't, she said, simply, not cruelly, just factually. I want to talk. About what happened. About us. There isn't an us anymore, Michael. I know I'm driving, she said. I have to go. She hung up. Her hands were steady on the wheel. Her jaw was set. And somewhere in her chest, where 4 days ago there had been a wound that kept reopening, she noticed something. It had closed a little. Not healed closed. The way a structure stabilizes when you find the thing it's missing and put it back. She didn't know exactly what she'd put back. She thought she was beginning to. She called Jen. Michael called me, she said. What? And I have a commission, potentially. From him. From Dante. A silence longer than the previous one, more loaded. Eliza, Jen said slowly. Start from the warehouse. She told her everything. The building, the conversation, the professional terms, the commission offer the moment she'd almost said the other thing and hadn't. Jen listened, the way Jen listened when she was withholding reaction to collect more data, quiet and focused, and saving it all up. When Eliza finished, Jen said, He gave you professional terms. I set the terms. He agreed. Without negotiating. Without negotiating. Eliza. Jen's voice was doing the thing where she was being extremely careful. I need you to hear me say this from a place of love and also complete terror. This man, who may or may not have connections that Paulo's presence heavily implies, has done in 4 days what Michael never did in 2 years. Eliza's hands tightened on the wheel. Which is, he's listening to you, Jen said. Like you're the most important thing in the room. Like what you say matters before you've finished saying it. A pause. That's intoxicating, Eliza. I need you to know it's intoxicating because it means you have to be really, really careful. She exhaled. I know. Do you? Yes. She meant it. I know what I'm walking into. I'm not pretending it's simple. But you're walking into it anyway. She didn't answer immediately. She let the silence say what it needed to say. Then, "The building is worth saving, Jen. That part is completely real. And I am trying to figure out if the rest of it is too." A long beat. "Okay," Jen said finally. "Okay. Just keep your eyes open." "I always do. Promise me." "I promise." She got off the call, drove the rest of the way to her office, sat in the parking structure for a moment before going in, which was not something she normally did, which meant something. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Dante. "Thank you for this morning." She looked at it, typed back. "The building thanked me. I was just the one listening." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "That's exactly what I mean." She put the phone in her bag and went into the building and sat at her desk and opened the blank document that was going to become the preliminary scope, and for 20 minutes she sat there looking at it with the cursor blinking. Because here was the thing she hadn't said to Jen. The thing she hadn't even finished saying to herself. It wasn't the commission. It wasn't the dinner or the protection or the text at 2 in the morning. Those were all real, and she was paying attention to all of them. It was the moment in the warehouse when she'd turned to face him after 20 minutes of work and said the bones are genuinely good. And he had looked at her, not at the building, at her with that expression. The one that arrived and didn't immediately rearrange itself for an audience. She had been talking about the building. She was not entirely sure that's all he'd heard. She started typing the scope. She was 3 paragraphs in when her desk phone rang. Unknown number, desk line. Odd. She picked up. "Eliza Grant." A voice she didn't recognize. Male, unhurried. "Miss Grant, I understand you were at the Russo building this morning." Her hand went still on her keyboard. "Who is this?" "A concerned party," the voice said. "I'd suggest you think carefully about who you're accepting commissions from. The Russo family's portfolio comes with complications." "How did you get this number?" "Miss Grant." The voice stayed pleasant. That was the most unsettling part, the pleasantness. "I'm simply suggesting that a professional of your caliber has many opportunities. You don't need to limit yourself to entanglements that could become difficult." The line went quiet. She sat there for a full 10 seconds after the call ended, phone still in her hand, her pulse doing something it had no business doing in her professional workspace. Then she picked up her cell phone and typed to Dante. "Someone just called my desk, said I should think carefully about working with you." Pleasant voice. Didn't give a name. The reply came in 60 seconds. "Are you still in your office?" "Yes, stay there. Paula will be outside in 12 minutes. She stared at the screen. 12 minutes. Not "I'll look into it." Not "don't worry." A specific time frame. A specific response. She typed Dante. "Who called me?" A longer pause this time. She watched the 3 dots appear and disappear twice before his message came through. "Someone who is unhappy that I'm moving toward legitimate operations. Someone who would prefer I remain manageable." She read it twice. "Are they dangerous?" His answer took 45 seconds. She counted. "To me, manageable. To someone connected to me who doesn't have protection potentially." She set the phone down on her desk. Put both hands flat on the surface. Breathed. This was the moment. She knew it was the moment. The part where the structure revealed whether it was actually load-bearing or whether what had appeared solid was going to flex in exactly the wrong way under exactly the wrong weight. She could call this done, right now, before the assessment, before Monday's scope, before anything else became real. She could email him professionally. "I've reconsidered. I have a conflict. I wish you well with the project," and return to her life as it had been before Saturday, which was quieter and smaller, and not remotely as awake as it had felt for the last 4 days. She could do that. Her phone buzzed again. "Dante, I should have told you this was possible before this morning. I didn't because I didn't expect it to move this fast. I'm sorry." She looked at that word. Sorry. From a man who she was fairly certain said it less than any person she had ever met. She picked up her phone. Tell me everything, she typed back. Tonight. All of it. No managed honesty. 3 dots. Then, yes. And then, a second later, Paulo is outside. If you look out your window, you'll see the black car. She stood up, walked to the window, looked down. Black car. Paulo at the wheel, looking straight ahead with the expression of someone who was always watching everything and never appeared to be. She stood there and let herself feel the full weight of it. The fear that was real. The anger at being made vulnerable without full information. The thing underneath both of those that she still couldn't name cleanly, but that had been growing steadily since a man in a VIP section had stood up when she approached and said her name, like he'd already decided she was worth learning. She went back to her desk. She opened the preliminary scope document. The cursor was still blinking where she'd left it. She started typing again. She was going to the meeting tonight. She was going to hear everything. And she was going to decide with her eyes fully open, which was, as it happened, the only way she had ever known how to make a decision that mattered. Outside, Paulo held the perimeter. Inside, Eliza Grant built the framework for a structure she wasn't yet certain would hold in full knowledge, that it was the most honest work she'd done in years. Everything, no managed honesty. He was already at the door when she arrived. Not Paulo. Dante. Same as Thursday morning, opening it himself in the dark sweater sleeves pushed up. Except tonight, his face had something in it that the previous evenings hadn't carried. Something compressed. The specific tension of a man who had spent the afternoon deciding exactly how much truth to bring to a conversation, and had landed on all of it, and was now living with that decision before she'd even crossed the threshold. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm here," she said, which was her version of "ask me again after you've told me everything." He understood. She could see him understand it. He stepped back, and she walked in, and he didn't offer wine first or food or anything that would soften the air between them. He just led her to the same room as before, and sat across from her, and folded his hands on the table, and looked at her with the eyes of a man who had decided not to manage this. "His name is Victor Corelli," Dante said. "He runs private lending and enforcement in the south corridor of the city. My family and his family have operated in parallel for 20 years, not as allies, not as enemies, as an arrangement. Mutually agreed boundaries." "Past tense," she said. "You said operated." "Yes." He held her gaze. "4 years ago I started restructuring. Moving the lending operations toward licensed financial services, moving the enforcement infrastructure out entirely, which meant the arrangement with Corelli stopped serving him the way it used to. Because your legitimacy makes him look illegitimate by comparison." Something in his face shifted. "That is a more precise read than most people arrive at." "I'm an engineer," she said. "I read what forces are doing to a structure." "Corelli has been patient," Dante continued. "He's made it clear he prefers the old arrangement. He's made that clear in various ways over 4 years. But moving against me directly is expensive and complicated. So instead..." He stopped. "Instead, he moves against the people connected to you," she finished. Yes, she sat with that. Felt the specific weight of it, not fear exactly, but something adjacent to it. The kind of clarity that arrives when a situation stops being abstract. "Has he hurt someone before?" she asked. "Someone close to you?" A pause. "The kind that had a history in it." "My cousin Marco," Dante said. 3 years ago, he was handling a property negotiation on my behalf. Nothing sensitive. Corelli's people approached him not violently, but with enough pressure that Marco understood the message." He looked at her steadily. "Marco stepped back from working with me. He has a family. I understood." "You didn't protect him." "I didn't know it was coming," he said. And something in his voice had a texture she hadn't heard before, not guilt exactly, but the thing guilt leaves behind when you've carried it long enough that it becomes structural. By the time I understood the pattern, it had already happened. She looked at him. "And Paulo, and the car outside my office today. That's you not making the same mistake." "Yes." She exhaled slowly. "Dante, I need you to hear what I'm about to say. I'm listening. I am not Marco. I am not someone you get to make decisions for because you've decided I need protecting. If I am going to be in whatever this is, I need to know what I'm in before it happens, not after. Her voice was steady. Today I picked up my desk phone, and a stranger told me to think carefully about my choices. That happened to me without my consent, because I walked into your world without full information. That cannot happen again. He held her gaze through all of it. Didn't deflect, didn't minimize. You're right, he said. Just that. Not I understand, or I'll try. You're right, like an admission that had been waiting to be spoken aloud. So tell me the rest, she said. All of it. Because I need to decide what I'm deciding with actual information. He told her. It took 40 minutes. He spoke with the same quality he did everything carefully directly without performing either more menace or more innocence than was accurate. The Rousseau family history, his grandfather who built the original operation in the 60s out of construction contracts and informal lending. His father who expanded it and saw the gray areas as simply the cost of operating in a city that ran on relationships and leverage. Dante himself, who had watched his father age into a man hollowed out by the weight of what he'd built, and had decided at 26 that inheritance didn't have to mean replication. I'm not clean, he said toward the end of it. I want to be precise about that. 4 years of restructuring means I have 4 years of distance from certain operations. It does not mean I have 40 years of distance. There are things in the history of this family that I cannot undo. I can only determine what happens from here. She had been listening the way she listened to buildings for what the structure was actually saying under the surface presentation. And what she heard underneath the precision and the control was something she recognized from her own work. The specific ache of someone who had inherited something damaged and was trying to figure out whether it was worth saving and what saving it would actually cost. Why legitimacy? She asked. You could have kept the arrangement with Corelli, kept the old structure. Easier probably. He was quiet for a moment. Then, my father died 2 years ago. Cardiac event. He was 61. He looked at the table between them. The week before he died, he told me that the thing he regretted most was not what he'd done. It was what he'd made impossible by doing it, the things he couldn't be, the rooms he couldn't enter, the version of himself that got foreclosed. He looked up. He told me to find what I'd foreclosed before it was too late to open the door again. The room was very quiet. She felt something move through her chest. Not romantic, something more fundamental than that. The recognition of grief that had been converted into motion. She knew that particular alchemy. She'd watched her mother do it after her father left, turning the wound into architecture, into the way she built her life afterward, load-bearing and precise. He sounds like someone worth honoring, she said quietly. Dante looked at her for a moment with something she had no armor against. He was trying to be at the end. She reached across the table, not dramatic, not a declaration. She just put her hand over his, briefly, the way you do when someone has said something true, and you want them to know you heard it. His hand turned under hers and held it for just a second. Then she pulled back and they both let the moment be what it was without manufacturing anything additional out of it. Okay, she said. Okay. I'm not running. She held up one finger. But I need a direct line, not texts to Paolo, not 12 minutes and a car appearing. If something happens that puts me in the picture, I hear it from you immediately before it becomes a situation I'm reacting to instead of navigating. Agreed, he said. And Corelli. Is he going to escalate? Dante's jaw tightened slightly. I am having a conversation with him tomorrow. What kind of conversation? The kind where I make clear that touching anyone connected to me in any capacity moves us out of the era of patient arrangements and into something neither of us wants. She read the subtext of that without difficulty. Be careful, she said. Not, are you sure, or is that wise? Just be careful. Like she was already in a position to say it and mean it and have it received. He looked at her like she'd done something unexpected again. I will. She picked up her wine, she'd barely touched it. Now tell me about the other properties. Not because I'm going to take all of them, Because I need to understand the full scope of what I'm potentially adjacent to. He almost smiled. You're doing due diligence. I'm an engineer, she said. I always do due diligence. He told her about the properties. She asked specific, precise questions. He answered them without hedging. By 9 o'clock, they had moved from the table to the sitting room, and the professional conversation had acquired edges that were not entirely professional, the way it did when two people spent enough time being genuinely honest with each other that the honesty started to generate its own heat. She noticed it. She was fairly certain he did too. Neither of them named it. At 9:20, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it automatically, and then she went still. Michael. Again. Not a call this time. A text. I need to talk to you. It's important. Please. She read it twice. Felt the old reflex, the one that 2 years of caring about someone built into your nervous system, whether you wanted it or not, and then felt something else push through it. Not indifference. Something more chosen than indifference. She put the phone face down. Your expression changed, Dante said. Michael texted me. A beat. What did he say? That it's important. She looked at Dante. It won't be. You sound certain. I am. She paused, testing the truth of it, found it solid. He called Tuesday too. He wanted to know who you were. She watched Dante's face. He saw us at Onyx. I know, Dante said. Paulo mentioned it. She stared at him. Paulo told you Michael called me. Paulo told me your ex-boyfriend was making attempts at contact, yes. He held her gaze without flinching. I did not tell Paulo to monitor your calls. He monitors the perimeter and reports anything that seems relevant to the security picture. Is Michael relevant to the security picture? He was an unknown variable approaching someone under my protection. From Paulo's perspective, I am not under your protection, she said with a precision that was not quite anger, but was its immediate neighbor. I am a person who has agreed to have Paulo nearby as a precaution. That is not the same thing. Dante looked at her. The expression on his face was the one she was starting to map, the one where he was genuinely recalibrating rather than performing recalibration. You're right, he said. Again, second time tonight. She was beginning to understand this was not a small thing from him. I handle Michael, she said. He is not a security concern. He is a man who made a mistake and is now experiencing the consequences. Understood. I mean it, Dante. I know you do. He leaned forward slightly. And I mean it when I say understood. Paulo will be instructed accordingly. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she picked up her wine. Good. They sat in silence for a beat, not uncomfortable, but recalibrating. Two people finding the shape of an arrangement that had no template. Can I ask you something? Dante said. Yes. What made you stay the first night? At Onyx, when Paulo brought the invitation. He was watching her carefully. You're not someone who does things without a reason. She thought about how to answer honestly. I was angry, she said. At Michael. At the situation. At myself for not seeing it coming. And I had just said something to myself, whispered it, I thought. And then a stranger appeared with an invitation, and I thought... She stopped, started again. I thought, what's the alternative? Going home and crying into the same pillow again. I'd already done that 4 nights in a row. She paused. So I made a different choice. A spite decision, he said. An alive decision, she corrected. Spite was the vehicle. But what I actually wanted was to feel like myself again. Like the version of me that existed before 2 years of being managed by someone who was lying the whole time. Dante was very still. He managed you. He was careful, she said. About what I knew and when I knew it, and how much access I had to what was actually happening. Her voice was even. She'd had enough time with this to be even about it. I am very good at my work. I can read a building. I apparently cannot always read a person. You're reading me, Dante said. I'm trying to. And she looked at him for a long moment. Thought about the 40 minutes of history, The word yet. The way he'd said, "You're right," like it cost something real. The hand briefly held. "You're more honest than I expected," she said finally, "which makes me more cautious than I'd otherwise be, because honesty and trustworthiness are not the same thing. Honesty is what someone gives you. Trustworthiness is what the pattern shows over time." He absorbed that. "That's a reasonable position." "I know. I'd like the chance to build the pattern," he said, directly, without dressing it up. "I know that too," she said. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't look at it immediately. When she did, Michael again. "Eliza, I'm outside your building. Can we please just talk?" She went completely still. Outside your building, her building, which meant her apartment building, which meant he'd gone there tonight, had gone and found her not home, and was now— "What is it?" Dante said. Not a question. He could read her face. She showed him the phone. His expression did something she hadn't seen before. It was controlled. It was always controlled, but beneath the control there was something that had edges. Something that had decided something. "Where does Paulo think you are tonight?" she asked. "He knows you're here," Dante said. He was already reaching for his phone. "Your building is covered. Michael is not a threat." "No." Dante agreed, typing quickly. "But I need to know who else is outside your building tonight, Eliza." That landed differently than she expected. Not Michael is a problem. Who else? Corelli. The call to her desk. The pattern Paulo was watching for. Her pulse shifted. "You think Corelli?" "I think Corelli's people watch who watches me," Dante said, setting his phone down. "And if they've identified your building, Michael standing outside it at 9:30 on a Thursday is either coincidence or it's being used. Michael doesn't know anything about Corelli. He doesn't need to." Dante looked at her. "He just needs to be somewhere he shouldn't be while someone else is paying attention." The room felt different now. The warmth of the last 2 hours still in the air, but with something colder threaded through it. Reality asserting itself with both hands. "Paulo just texted," Dante said, looking at his phone. "2 men, black sedan, parked across from your building for the past hour. They left 4 minutes ago." Eliza felt the information land in her body before her mind fully processed it. 4 minutes ago. She'd been here 2 hours away from all of it, while something she hadn't consented to was happening in the geography of her life. "I need to go home," she said. "I'll have Paulo drive you. I can—" "Eliza." His voice was quiet and exact. "Please." She looked at him. The please was real. She could hear it was real, not performance, not management. A man who was asking rather than deciding. She thought about what she'd said in the warehouse district. "I need to know what I'm in before it happens." This was what she was in. Eyes open as promised. "Okay," she said. He walked her to the door. Paulo was already pulling around when they reached the entrance, the black car quiet at the curb. She stood for a moment in the doorway, the warmth of the house behind her, the cold of the night ahead. "Dante." She turned to face him. "Yes." "Tomorrow after the Corelli conversation. I want to know how it goes, immediately." "Yes," he said. "And I'm sending you the scope on Monday, regardless of tonight. The building is worth saving. That doesn't change." Something moved through his face. The relief, again the real kind. Not relief that she was staying close to him, but relief that she was staying true to herself inside this. Like that was the thing he'd been most uncertain about. "Thank you," he said. She stepped out, got in the car. Paulo pulled into traffic without a word. She looked out the window at the city moving past, and felt the full weight of the evening, settling through her, the history Dante had laid out. The hand briefly held the word right, said twice the black sedan outside her building that had left 4 minutes ago. She thought about Jen's voice. "This man has done in 4 days what Michael never did in 2 years. He's listening to you. That's intoxicating." She thought about what she'd said back. "I know what I'm walking into." She was beginning to understand that she'd been only partially right about that. Not because he'd hidden things he hadn't tonight, not a single thing. but because some rooms you can only understand from inside them. You can read the blueprint all you want. You can assess the structure and identify the load-bearing walls and calculate the weight the whole thing can hold. And then you have to walk in. Paulo stopped in front of her building. Michael was gone, the sidewalk clear, no sign of him. She sat in the car for a moment, looking at the entrance. "The sedan," she said to Paulo. "The two men. Do you know who they work for?" Paulo was quiet for exactly 1 second. "Yes." "Corelli." Another second. "Yes." She nodded. Got out of the car. Walked to her building entrance, keyed in, stepped into the lobby. Did not look back, though she knew Paulo would stay until she was inside. Her phone rang in the elevator. "Michael." She stared at the screen for the length of 1 floor. Then she answered. "Michael, don't come to my building again." A pause. "Eliza, I mean it. We're done talking. If there's something genuinely urgent, text me. But showing up at my building at night is not something I'm going to allow." Her voice was steady. "Do you understand? Who is he?" Michael's voice had something in it. She recognized the tone he used when he was about to reframe a situation, so he was the one who'd been wronged. "That man at Onyx. What do you know about him?" She stepped out of the elevator into her hallway. "Good night, Michael," she said, and hung up. She unlocked her apartment, stepped inside, stood in the dark for a moment before turning on the light. Just stood there in the space that was hers. That was quiet and unchanged, and had no black sedans or complicated histories in it. Then she took out her phone and typed to Dante. "I'm home. I'm safe. I handled Michael." His reply came in under a minute. "I know," Paulo confirmed. "Thank you for tonight." She stood there looking at that. "Thank you for tonight. For 40 minutes of history and 1 question, and the hand briefly held, and you're right twice, like it was the most important direction he'd traveled in years." She typed back, "Monday." The scope. And then, after a pause, because it was true, and because she had decided to be a woman who said true things. "Be careful tomorrow." His answer came slowly. She watched the 3 dots appear and disappear 3 times before the message arrived, and she understood from that, from the 3 attempts, that he was being careful with it. That it mattered what he said. "I will," he wrote finally, "because now I have a reason to." She put her phone down on the counter. She stood in her kitchen in her coat in the quiet of her own space, and felt something she couldn't name settle into place inside her chest, not resolution, not certainty. Something earlier than either of those. The feeling of a structure that has been tested and has not, despite everything, come apart. Something load-bearing still holding. She hung up her coat, made tea she didn't particularly need, and sat at her kitchen table in the ordinary light of a Thursday night in the middle of a life that had become in 4 days unrecognizable and more real than it had been in years. She was not afraid. She was awake. And in the morning, Dante Russo would walk into a room with Victor Corelli, and she would not be there. And she would not know what happened until he told her, and she would sit with that, with the not knowing, with the trust it required, with the weight of having chosen this, with her eyes open. She sat with it now. She found she could. She didn't sleep well. She'd expected not to. She lay in the dark doing what she did when a structural problem wouldn't resolve, running the variables, testing the assumptions, looking for the place where the calculation was off. Except the variables tonight were not timber and brick. They were Victor Corelli and a black sedan and a conversation happening tomorrow in a room she would not be in between a man she was choosing to trust and a man who had called her desk phone with a pleasant voice and said, "Think carefully." At 2 in the morning, she got up and made more tea and sat at her kitchen table with the scope document open on her laptop, and she worked. Because that was what she did. When the emotional architecture got too complex to hold in real time, she moved into the structural. She worked for 2 hours on the warehouse assessment, precise exacting work, the kind that required all of her, and by 4 o'clock, she had something she was proud of, and her nervous system had quieted enough that she could sleep. She woke at 7 to a text from Dante. "Meeting is at 10. I'll contact you when it's done." She typed back, "Okay." Then after a pause, "Eat something before you go." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then, "You sound like someone who intends to keep saying things like that." She felt the warmth of it move through her before she could intercept it. Typed. "Don't get used to it." Sent it. Put the phone down before she could see his reply, because she needed to get ready for work, and she did not need to be standing in her kitchen smiling at her phone like a woman who had forgotten the black sedan. The pleasant voice, the very reasonable reasons to be careful. She was careful. She was also smiling. She was learning to hold both. Jen called at 8:45 right as Eliza was walking into her office. "Tell me everything," Jen said. "You sent me the address last night and then I heard nothing." "I'm fine." "Eliza." "There were some developments." She kept her voice neutral, which was a choice. "Corelli, the man from the call, had people outside my building last night." Silence. The specific silence of Jen recalibrating what she thought she was dealing with. "Define people," Jen said carefully. "2 men, black sedan. They left before I got home." She sat at her desk. "Paulo was there. They're known." "Known." Jen's voice had gone very controlled. "Eliza, known to whom?" "To Dante. To Paulo. It's part of the situation I walked into. He told me everything last night. All of it. And the fact that there were men outside your building is being addressed today," Eliza said. "Dante is meeting with Corelli this morning." Another silence. Longer. She could hear Jen processing, assembling, coming to terms. "Are you scared?" Jen asked. The same question as before, but different now, heavier, more specific. She gave it the same honest treatment. "Yes," she said. "A real amount. Not paralyzing. A real amount." "Okay," Jen said. "That's okay. That's actually a better answer than last time." "I know. Because last time, you should have been scared and weren't quite there yet." "I know, Jen. And you're still." "Yes." She said it before Jen could finish the sentence. Because the answer was still yes, and she'd spent the early hours of the morning confirming it, and she didn't need to perform uncertainty she wasn't feeling. "I'm still in it, eyes open." A long exhale from Jen. "Okay. What do you need from me?" "Nothing right now." She paused. "Maybe lunch later. Somewhere normal. Somewhere with bad lighting and good soup." "I know exactly the place," Jen said. 12:30. 12:30. She worked. She revised the scope, ran the structural calculations twice, drafted 3 emails that had nothing to do with Dante Russo, attended an 11 o'clock call about a different project in a different neighborhood, where the only dangerous thing was a client who didn't understand what load-bearing meant. She was good at her job. She was good at her job even when the background of her life had acquired the texture of something she'd never navigated before. And she found a grim specific satisfaction in that. 10:47. Her phone stayed quiet. 11:15. Quiet. 11:52, when she was putting on her coat to meet Jen, it buzzed. "Dante. It's done. He'll stand down. We should talk tonight, not urgent, but important." She read it 3 times. "It's done." She exhaled a breath she hadn't fully realized she'd been holding for 4 hours. "Is everyone okay?" she typed. "Yes." "Tonight, yes." 7. She put the phone in her bag and walked out into the pale cold of late morning and felt the specific relief of a structure that has been tested and has not fallen. Not triumphant, not celebratory, just solid. The way things feel when they were actually built to hold. She told Jen over soup. Jen listened with both hands wrapped around her bowl and her face doing the work of someone trying to determine how worried to remain now that the immediate crisis had apparently resolved. "He met with him," Jen said. "Yes. And Corelli just agreed to stand down. Dante said it's done." She ate a spoonful of soup. "I believe him. Because he said it. Because he hasn't lied to me yet. About anything, including the things that would have been easier to soften." She set down her spoon. "Jen, I know what this looks like from the outside. I know it looks fast and reckless and like something a woman does when she's rebounding and not thinking clearly. That's exactly what I'm trying not to say, Jen admitted. It would look like that. Eliza continued. If I were doing it because of Michael. But I am not doing it because of Michael. Michael is finished. Michael has been finished since Tuesday morning, and every day since has confirmed it. She looked at her friend. I am doing this because of Dante, which is different. Jen looked at her for a long moment. Tell me the difference. Michael managed me, carefully, always slightly less than what was true in what he said, in what he let me see, in what version of himself he showed me. He was always performing. She paused. Dante shows me the complicated thing. He shows me the part that's hard to hear. And then he says you're right when I push back on him, not because he wants to make me feel good, but because he actually reconsiders. She met Jen's eyes. I have never had that. I didn't know to want it. Jen was quiet. Then slowly. He says you're right. Twice in one evening. To a woman he just met. To a woman who was correct, Eliza said. That's the thing. It wasn't a gesture. It was an accurate assessment. Jen looked at the ceiling, looked back. I am trying very hard to stay worried. You can stay a little worried, Eliza said. That's reasonable. I'm going to keep staying a little worried. Good, that's what I need you for. Jen picked up her spoon. Is he... She stopped, started differently. When you're with him, does it feel like something real? Eliza thought about the hand briefly held, the relief in his face when she'd said she was staying true to herself inside this. The 3 attempts at a text, the dots appearing and disappearing before he'd sent because now I have a reason to. Yes, she said quietly. It feels like something I wasn't planning for and can't reverse engineer and don't entirely know the shape of yet. She paused. But real, yes. Jen nodded once, the nod of a woman who was going to keep her concerns close, but was also somewhere underneath them, genuinely glad. Okay, Jen said. Then be careful and keep going. That's my plan, Eliza said. She spent the afternoon finalizing the scope. At 5 o'clock, she sent it to Dante, clean, precise 22 pages of structural assessment and preliminary restoration framework, attached without comment except for a single line. Preliminary scope for the warehouse district property, based on what the building actually is, not what would be convenient. His reply came in 3 minutes. This is extraordinary work. She typed, I know, see you at 7. She arrived at the townhouse at 1 minute past 7, which was as close as she was going to get to exactly on time. Dante opened the door. He looked different from Thursday's compressed tension and last night's managed weight. Not lighter exactly, cleaner. Like something that had been pressing on him for 4 years had been relieved by a few degrees, which was not nothing. How did it go? She asked, walking past him. Sit down, he said. I'll tell you all of it. She sat. He sat across from her, leaned forward with his forearms on the table, the way he did when he was going to say something real. Corelli backed down, he said. Not gracefully, but clearly. He understands that the cost of not backing down is now higher than the cost of the arrangement changing. What did you offer him? He looked at her steadily. A legitimate contract. One of my licensed lending subsidiaries, favorable terms, clean paper. A pause. I gave him a door into legitimacy. Whether he takes it is his choice. What he can't do anymore is use the old arrangement as leverage over mine. She absorbed this. You solved it by giving him a way forward, not a threat backward. The threat was implicit, he said. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But yes, I'd rather build a door than burn one. She nodded slowly. And my building? Safe, he said. The desk call won't be repeated. Paolo's coverage is reduced effective Monday. Not eliminated, reduced. He held her gaze. Because the threat level is lower, not because the care is. She felt something move through her at that. The distinction he'd drawn threat level versus care, and the fact that he'd drawn it without being asked. That he'd anticipated the question she would have asked about what reduced meant. "Okay," she said. "I also want to talk about the scope," he said, and something in his voice shifted the professional register, the one that sat alongside everything else, but was genuinely a different thing. 22 pages. The mixed-use concept, the heritage framework, the phased approach. He looked at her. "You included a community partnership model, workshop space accessible to the public. The building was built by people who made things," she said. "It should still be a place where people make things." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "My great-grandmother's name was Rosa. She ran the production floor. My grandfather told me she knew every person who worked there by name and by what they were good at." Another pause. "I hadn't told anyone the family connection when I showed you the building." "I know," she said. "You showed it to me as a building." "Yes, and the community partnership model came from the building," she said. "From what the bones of it told me about what it was meant to be." He looked at her with the expression she was learning to read, the one that had no performance in it, that arrived without its usual careful management, and stayed just long enough for her to see it was real. "I want to move forward," he said, "with the restoration, with your firm leading it. And I want it done the way you described it, the way the building deserves." He paused. "And I want to put Rosa's name on it, on the restored building. I want to call it the Rosa Russo Community Workshop." She felt the texture of that, the weight of it, the rightness of it. "Yes," she said simply. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His face went very still. "What?" she said. "Michael Grant." He turned the phone to show her. A text to his personal number, not Paulo's, not a business line. His personal number. "He says he knows who I am, and he wants to meet." The air in the room changed. "How does he have your number?" she asked. Her voice was controlled. Her mind was not quite. "He doesn't," Dante said. "Or he shouldn't." He was already typing to Paulo, she assumed. "Someone gave it to him." Corelli, possibly. His jaw had tightened. Or someone adjacent to Corelli who was making a separate point. He set the phone down. "Eliza, has Michael said anything to you in the calls, the texts that seemed like he knew more than he should?" She ran it back. "The calls. Who is he?" He looked. The text. "I know who he is. And tonight, he knows who I am and wants to meet." She felt something cold settle into her chest. "I need to call him," she said. "Eliza, he's not a threat," she said. "But if someone gave him your number and told him something, I need to know what he knows and where it came from." She looked at Dante steadily. "This is mine to handle. Let me handle it." He held her gaze for one long moment. Then he put his phone face down on the table and said, "I'll be here." She called Michael. He answered on the first ring. "Eliza, who told you who he was?" She said. No greeting, no warm-up. A pause. "Someone called me. Said you were involved with a dangerous man and that I should—" "Who called you Michael?" He didn't give a name. He said he was concerned about you. He gave me a number and told me to reach out." "What number?" Michael read it to her. She looked at Dante. He was already looking at his phone, Paulo again. His expression confirmed it before he said anything. "Corelli's associate," he said quietly. "Secondary line." She spoke back into her phone. "Michael, listen to me carefully. The person who called you is not concerned about me. He is trying to create a problem using you as the instrument. Do not contact that number again. Do not contact Dante Russo, and do not come to my building." Her voice was level and exact. "I am not in danger. I am making my own choices, and I am asking you as someone you spent 2 years claiming to care about to respect that." A long silence. "Are you sure?" Michael asked. Quieter now. The performance of concern had gone out of it, leaving something more honest underneath something she might have appreciated 2 weeks ago. I'm sure, she said. She hung up. She set the phone on the table between them. She and Dante looked at each other across it. Corelli gave Michael your number, she said. Yes, he paused. It was a test. To see if I'd reacted to the direct conversation today by overcorrecting, by pulling Paolo, reducing exposure too quickly. He exhaled slowly. He wanted to see what happens when someone pokes the perimeter. And what happens? Dante looked at her. You handled it, he said. Without me. She met his eyes. I told you I would. A beat. Then something settled in his face, something that had been slightly unsettled since the phone buzzed returned to its foundation. Corelli will try one more thing, Dante said. It's his pattern. He tests, he probes, and then if the structure holds, he accepts the new reality. He looked at her steadily. The structure held tonight. The structure held tonight because you told me everything, she said. And because I knew what I was walking into. He nodded. Yes. She looked at the phone between them. Then she looked at him. Really looked the way she looked at buildings that had survived longer than they were supposed to, with the specific attention of someone who understood what survival cost and what it meant. I'm going to the gala with you, she said. He stilled. The Russo Foundation gala is in 3 weeks. I know. I looked it up after you mentioned it last week. She kept her voice even. If Corelli is watching the perimeter, the most clarifying thing I can do is stand in it visibly and without apology. She paused. And I want to go. Not as a statement, because I want to be there. The silence lasted 5 seconds. She counted. Eliza, he said. His voice had something in it she'd only heard once before in the moment she'd said, "Tell me everything," and he'd said yes. Something that had been waiting to be allowed. Don't make it complicated, she said. I want to go to the gala. Say yes. Yes, he said. She picked up the phone and turned it over in her hands once, then set it down. Reached into her bag. Pulled out a small flash drive. The full digital scope files, she said. Every drawing calculation and specification. I want your architect to have them before Monday's meeting. He took the drive, looked at it for a moment, then looked at her. You brought this tonight, even with everything else. The building doesn't stop being worth saving because the rest of the evening got complicated, she said. That's not how it works. Something in him, the last of whatever had been compressed since the Corelli meeting released. She could see it happen. Not dramatically. The way structural tension releases quietly, completely, with the whole shape of the thing changing by a degree that was small and total at once. He reached into his jacket pocket. Placed 2 things on the table between them. A key, old brass, the kind that belonged to something with history in it. And a bracelet, silver simple, the kind of thing that could be worn every day without announcement. She looked at them. What are these? The key is to the building, he said. So you can go whenever you need to. So it's yours to work in, not mine to invite you to. He paused. The bracelet is from my grandmother. She wore it for 50 years. She gave it to me before she died and said to give it to someone who earned it. He held her gaze. She meant someone who was real. The room was very quiet. She looked at the key and the bracelet for a long moment. Then she picked up the key first because she was at her core a woman who led with work, with structure, with the thing that was real and measurable and hers. She closed her hand around it. Then she picked up the bracelet, held it for a moment, put it on. She looked at him across the table. He was looking back at her with the expression that had no management in it, no performance, no careful assembly for an audience. Just this. Just what was actually there. I want to be clear about something, she said. Tell me. I am not here because of Michael, she said. I am not here because of Saturday night and spite and wanting someone to see me in a VIP section. I am not here because you gave me a commission or protection or a bracelet from your grandmother. She held his gaze. I am here because you told me the truth when the truth was difficult. Because you said you're right and meant it. Because you showed me a building and trusted me to see it for what it actually was. She paused. That is why I'm here. I need you to know that." "I know," he said. "Say it like you believe it." A beat. And then Dante Russo controlled precise a man who had built his entire life around managing what he revealed, and when leaned forward and said quietly, and without any armor at all, "I know, and I am. I have been since the moment you said you find out what's still worth saving. I have been hoping you'd find something worth saving here." She held his gaze. "I have," she said. He reached across this table. She put her hand in his. No calculation this time, no brief and then withdrawn. His hand closed around hers and stayed. They sat like that for a while in the quiet of the room, with the city moving outside and the scope filed and the key in her pocket and the bracelet on her wrist and the complicated layered load-bearing truth of what they were building between them, neither simple nor reckless, neither blind nor afraid. Real. The only kind of thing worth building. 3 weeks later, she walked into the Russo Foundation gala in a black dress she had chosen for herself, with the silver bracelet on her wrist and the key in her clutch, because she had started carrying it the way she carried her professional tools, as part of what she was, where she was going, what she intended to build. Dante met her at the entrance. He looked at her for 1 full second, the way he had the first night, like something was being confirmed. And then he offered her his arm, and she took it, and they walked in together. People noticed. Of course they noticed. She felt the shift in the room, the way she felt structural changes in the air, in the weight of attention, in the way space reorganized itself around a new load-bearing element. She stood in it without flinching. A woman approached early in the evening, late 60s, silver hair, the kind of posture that came from decades of standing in rooms where she was underestimated and had stopped noticing. She looked at Eliza with dark eyes that were unmistakably related to Dante's. "You're the engineer," she said, not a question. "Yes," Eliza said. "Eliza Grant. He showed me the scope." The woman looked at her with an assessment that had nothing performative in it. "You want to put Rosa's name on the building." "The building asked for it," Eliza said. "I just listened." The woman was quiet for a moment. Then she put one hand briefly on Eliza's arm, the arm with the bracelet, and looked at it for just a second. She smiled. Small. Real. "Good," she said, and moved on. Dante appeared at Eliza's shoulder. "That was my Aunt Carmela," he said quietly. "She has never said good to anyone she's just met, in her life." "I told her the truth," Eliza said. "It tends to work." Later in the evening, standing at the edge of the room with a glass of wine and Dante beside her, she looked out at the crowd, the foundation donors, the community partners, the careful architecture of a man trying to build something legitimate out of something complicated, and she felt the full shape of where she was. Not where she'd planned to be, not remotely. 4 weeks ago, she had been standing at a bar in a burgundy dress, whispering something fierce and private to herself, and the universe had apparently leaned down and decided she needed a much larger answer than she'd expected. She had walked into this with her eyes open. She had demanded the truth and received it. She had set her terms and held them. She had done the work, the structural work, the honest work, the work of finding out what was load-bearing and deciding if it was still worth saving. It was. He was. And she standing in a room she hadn't imagined a month ago, with a key in her clutch and a bracelet on her wrist, and a man beside her who had looked at her since the first night. Like she was the most honest thing in any room he'd ever been in. She was exactly who she had always been. A woman who found out what was still worth saving. Who had found this time that the answer was also her. Eliza Grant lifted her glass. And for the first time in a long time, clear-eyed, unafraid, and completely irrevocably awake, she felt exactly like herself. And that was everything.